For the first time, I think really in American history, we have the phenomenon of perhaps the president selling American foreign policy.
Hello, and welcome to the PoliticsGirl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. I'm really excited about today's conversation because I've been trying to get Anne Applebaum on the show for years. Anne is an American journalist and historian, and I am a super fan of her work. Anne has written about the history of communism and the development of civil society in Eastern Europe. She's an expert on Russia. She is the author of the brilliant article which became the book Autocracy, Inc., a piece of work I have personally learned an extraordinary amount from. Anne was born in Washington, D.C., the eldest of three daughters. She attended Yale for history and literature, then the London School of Economics, where she received a master's degree in international relations, and followed that up with Oxford University before becoming a correspondent for The Economist and moving to Warsaw, Poland in 1988. Anne actually drove from Warsaw to Berlin in November 1989 to report on the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Anne has been the deputy editor of The Spectator, the political editor of The Evening Standard, and was on the editorial board of The Washington Post. Anne is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, was included on the 2020 list of the top 50 thinkers for the COVID-19 era, is on the board of the National Endowment for Democracy and the Renewed Democracy Initiative. She's a member of the International Board of Directors of the Institute of War and Peace Reporting and one of the 200 U.S. citizens sanctioned by Russia for the promotion of what they called Russia-phobic campaigns. So without further ado, please welcome Pulitzer Prize-winning author, historian, and staff writer for The Atlantic, Anne Applebaum. Welcome, Anne.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. I'm such a big fan of your work and your brain, and this is a real treat for me. You wrote a brilliant piece for The Atlantic a couple years ago that I did an entire piece on called The Bad Guys Are Winning, How a New Brand of Autocrats Are Outsmarting the West. And you explained in that piece that modern autocracies are not run simply by one bad guy at the top, but by a network of bad guys who use things like security services and propagandists and various kleptocratic financial structures, with kleptocracy, of course, being where corrupt leaders use political power to exploit their country's natural resources or steal its wealth for personal gain. And the members of these new autocratic nations are connected not only within their own countries, but among other autocratic nations. So these corrupt state-controlled groups do business with other corrupt state-controlled groups. The police force in one nation, like say Russia, can arm and train a police force in another country, which is what happened in Belarus and Hungary under Orban. That these propagandists share resources like troll farms, then promote multiple dictators' propaganda simultaneously. We know that Russia does that with us. And as you point out, these propagandists also share themes like the weakness of democracy or the danger of liberal values, which are then repeated constantly throughout the media, which often these people also control. So as we watch Donald Trump, his co-conspirators, his enablers taking over America at what seemingly mock speed, where do you think we sit in August 2026 when it comes to this new brand of dictator?
So that was a brilliant resume of a long book. So thank you very much. Now
Hey.
I guess nobody has to read it.
They should.
The one thing I would add that's important, especially for people who remember the Cold War, is to understand that this group of dictators who I was writing about, Russia, North Korea, Iran, China, are not linked together by any ideology. So they're not really bothered about whether Iran is a theocracy or China is a communist country. What links them is this set of common interests, their common interest in stealing money and hiding it and exporting it and storing it around the world, their common interests in fighting us, essentially, in fighting the civilization of liberal democracy, which they see as having ideas and language that are dangerous to them, like accountability and transparency and the rule of law. And they've created different ways in which they can work together. It's not like a single alliance. It's not like the Cold War where they had one treaty and they all did the same thing or talked the same way all the time, but they do cooperate in different ways. And you can see it, for example, in Russia's war in Ukraine, where the North Koreans have just sent troops to help the Russians and the Chinese are supplying them with components. And the Russians then in turn supply drones to Iran, which Iran, at the beginning of the war, Iran supplied drones to Russia. And so they work together. The thing that's most dramatic for Americans, and the thing that has changed the most since I wrote this book, it was published a couple of years ago now, is that the United States, which used to be the leader of the democratic world. In other words, the leader of the liberal democracies who were opposed to those kinds of political system, now plays a kind of neutral, ambiguous role at best. You can hear in Trump's own language that he actually sympathizes quite a bit with the autocrats. And he admires Xi Jinping because he doesn't have to worry about checks and balances or a free press or courts. And he instinctively prefers Putin to the European democracies because he understands his way of being in the world. And of course, he uses the same kind of language about the degeneracy of liberal values and the need for a new language of power. And of course, he's also bringing together in a way that we've never seen before in American history, business interests and political interests, so that it's unclear now in some cases whether U.S. foreign policy is being carried out on behalf of Americans or an American prosperity and, American influence, or whether it's being carried out on behalf of companies who are close to Donald Trump or friends of Donald Trump or political allies of Donald Trump. So the world that I described in that book a couple of years ago hasn't changed. It's still there. One or two members have dropped out or altered their policies. But the really profound change is that the United States is no longer directly opposed to it. And I know that maybe that's a kind of meta way of talking about Trump, but it's the thing that makes me the most worried about him. In other words, I see him looking for allies, not among liberal European democracies, not among America's traditional friends, the British, the French, the Germans, the Canadians. And instead, I see him, creating obstacles to all of those relationships and instead building relationships with Middle Eastern monarchies, with Putin. He would like, I think, to have a relationship with China and others. And so that's the thing that is most new since I first wrote the article you described.
Right. This is the thing I think that's most interesting to people, that these new autocrats, as you're saying, these links they share, the impunity they all seem to enjoy from the law, the world they're creating. It's not based, as you're saying, on some specific ideology like fascism or communism. They're not really interested in sort of the creed or country. They're sort of, these modern autocrats are above personal power above all, that their countries and the people definitely are secondary if considered at all. You wrote that this particular brand of autocrat is based around money, their own money, retaining power at all costs. I think we can see this incredibly clearly with Trump, who I think is really mirroring Putin. And I know that Trump was often saying, when I see the North Koreans, those people jump up when they see their leader. I want that happening for me, right? Yep. Trump is really solidifying this kind of power. And it's being allowed by the Republican Party. We had a lot more checks and balances here that should have stopped this kind of a leader. But the Republican Party itself seems to have made the calculation that autocracy will serve them better than democracy, that democracy itself has become an obstacle to their continued power. So they have decided to support and rubber stamp this rise of an alternative because they believe, and I would say Putin's inner circle believes, that they will personally benefit from that kind of loyalty to their relationship to Trump if the takeover is complete. And looking around today's America, it really feels like that might be a fair assessment.
What disturbs me the most is as you say, the Republican Party and the cabinet and others' refusal to check these really profound conflicts of interest. And so just to give one of their many, many examples, the Trump family owns a company called World Liberty Financial, which is a cryptocurrency company. And all kinds of people have invested in this company, and you can invest in it anonymously because one of the attributes of cryptocurrency is that it's anonymous. And so people have spent lots of money buying into the company. And of course, Trump will know who those are, and the rest of us might not know. And we do know of a specific example of one of the Emirati royal family who invested quite a lot of money into World Liberty Financial. And in exchange, it's possible that the United States has allowed some high-tech chips to be sold to the United Arab Emirates. So this is an example of a foreign leader who is in essence buying American policy. And again, it's a little more complicated than that. You would have to go through a legal process in order to determine that that's what happened and so on. But it's certainly the appearance of a conflict of interest that in the past we would never have had because it was unimaginable before Trump's second term that an American president would have a company like that, and that he wouldn't be somehow blocked by his party or by the press or by his colleagues from creating one. And so now we have this in multiple ways. The Trump family companies, Trump's sons' companies are doing business in the Middle East, in Europe, in Asia. And in all of those cases, there's a question about whether the people they're doing business with are doing it because, they just feel so great about investing in Don Jr.'s company, or are they doing it in order to buy a favor from the United States? And so for the first time, I think really in American history, certainly in modern history, and I mean, there aren't earlier precedents that are the same, we have the phenomenon of perhaps the president selling American foreign policy. There are domestic versions of this too, but somehow the foreign policy is harder for people to understand and track. I mean, most Americans aren't following American chip sales and how those work. But, multiple foreign leaders are now looking for ways in which they can buy or influence American decisions through investment in private companies. This is the kind of politics that I first saw in Russia. And so maybe I'm more sensitive to these kinds of issues because I worked in Russia in the 1990s. I was writing a book about Russian history at the time. I spent a lot of time in Moscow in that period, and I saw this system developing there. And I won't say that it's identical in the United States, but there's more in common than most Americans know or realize. And it's disturbing. And as I said, what it means in essence is that our leaders are not making decisions that are good for us. They're making decisions that are good for them, meaning them personally, them, their families, their friends, their companies.
Yeah. I mean, Donald Trump is clearly in it for the money. You just have to look at how much money he's making. He's made more money in the past year and a half than he has his entire life combined, from crypto, from his child's government contracts for his personal businesses. The Trump organization is clearly selling pardons. They're now selling advanced looks at his market moving tweets with True Social. I mean, the corruption to me seems in broad daylight at this point. And then, of course, U.S. companies. Now you've got U.S. government holding equity stakes in 30 private companies, which is up from 0 from last year. In some cases, the Trump government is the company's largest shareholder. And as experts point out, this raises huge questions about capital miscalculation, government neutrality, corrupt cronyism, which I think we can all see quite clearly, which is really all I'm seeing these days from the Trump administration. If you're nice to him, if you give him money, if you give him a donation, if his sons are involved in the company, that company's getting a government contract. So I think that the irony of calling Democrats communists or socialists when it's the Republican government that's actually taking over the means of production in private companies is really something else. But isn't there an ideology? Because I know that these new autocrats are not working with a particular ideology. Donald Trump is certainly not working with an ideology. He's working with a what's good for me, what power I can get, what money I can get, how can I be the specialist boy in the room. But I feel like there is an ideology on the periphery of the Trump family and the Trump organization and the Trump administration from the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. Those people really do have an ideology, sort of a way of life based around religion and white nationalism and patriarchy. So how does that work? How does the Trump's sort of amoral greed work in conjunction with those other very high-minded priorities? As we head into back to school season, it's the perfect time for a fresh routine or reset to something that makes you feel your best. So if upgrading your hair and skincare has been on your mind, this might be the sign to start. I have the Eye Restore Illumina face mask because I'm concerned about my face aging. And my husband Sean has the Eye Restore Elite Advanced Laser Hair Growth System because he is concerned about his hairline and hair fullness. We do them together in bed at night like high-tech nerds. His Eye Restore on his head and mine on my face. Eye Restore has been leading the way in red light therapy for over 2 decades. They have helped shape the category with clinically backed devices trusted by over 500,000 customers worldwide. The Illumina face mask that I have is lightweight, cordless, and packed with 2 times more LEDs than other top masks. It targets fine lines, breakouts, dullness with triple wavelength therapy. You just have to do it 10 minutes a few times a week for brighter, smoother, healthier looking skin. The Eye Restore Elite uses 300 lasers and 200 LEDs to help regrow thicker, healthier hair in as little as 3 months. It's effortless. You literally just wear it while you're working or reading or watching TV. And the best part is you can bundle both products together to make the perfect upgrade to your routine. iRestore is so confident in their technology that they offer a 12-month money-back guarantee. So if you don't see healthier looking skin or fuller looking hair, you will get a full refund, no awkward questions, just results or your money back. iRestore is offering some huge discounts in their red light therapy devices right now. You can save on customer favorites like the iRestore Elite Helmet and the Illumina Face Mask by heading to iRestore.com and using the code PoliticsGirl. That's PoliticsGirl at iRestore.com. And if they ask, please support the show and tell them we sent you. Give your hair and skin the upgrade they deserve so you can feel confident and refreshed going into the fall. So, we went to Italy this summer and my son asked if his carry-on could be our Noble suitcase because he likes the iPhone holder on the handle and the cup holder on the back. He likes being able to plug his tech directly into the bag and he just thought it would be better for the trip. But then I kept switching my rolling carry-on with his at train stations and airports because as much as I love my regular luggage, the Noble one just rolls so much better. It was infinitely easier. There is a reason Noble is rated the #1 luggage on Trustpilot. While most luggage is simply a box on wheels, nothing about it makes travel actually easier. Noble has done it completely differently. First, the entire suitcase has no zipper. It locks shut with a latch system that cannot be pried open. It has 360-degree wheels, which I can attest makes it effortless to pull, so it glides right next to you instead of dragging behind you like an anchor. There is a laptop pocket in the front that makes it easier to go through TSA. Locke loved that for his iPad. There is the built-in charging port, the cup holder, the bag looks good. It's just a sleek, minimalist shape that comes in different styles and colors so you can really personalize it to your needs. And, like many of the things I talk about on this show, Noble is a company that puts its money where its mouth is. So each suitcase comes with a 100-day money-back guarantee and a lifetime warranty. This is a company that stands behind what they have made. So upgrade to luggage that looks better and lasts longer so you can travel smarter. Head to nobletravel.com for up to 46% off your entire order. That's NOBL travel.com for up to 46% off. And after you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show. Tell them we sent you. How does the Trump's sort of amoral greed work in conjunction with those other very high-minded priorities?
This is funny. You've just put your finger on an article that I'm writing that will come out in a month or two. This is exactly the subject I'm working on. So yes, you're right. The way to think of it is like this, and this might sound a little strange. A lot of revolutions start with one big idea, but will often inspire other revolutions. In other words, like the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918 in Russia. Okay. So we all know it was a Marxist revolution and it was about creating a dictatorship of the proletariat and so on. But all kinds of other people attach themselves onto it. So free people, advocates of free love. And, actually there was a constructivist art and all kinds of other people sort of glommed onto it. And grifters who were trying to rip off aristocrats, all people supported it for all kinds of reasons. And what we're living through, I think, in the United States now is a revolution that's a little bit like that. In other words, there is this momentous change. There is a change in the way the state works. So the old idea that the president was constrained by the law and that he took account of the law before making decisions instead of doing what the Trump administration did, which is break the law and then wait and see if the courts catch up with him. And the old idea that Congress restrained the president and that Congress made decisions about funding and the president went along with those. That's broken down, and so you now have a president who's acting, as we've said, solely in his own interest. And so now there are all kinds of people seeking to attach themselves to this change. And some of them, as you say, are white nationalists. Some of them are people who believe America should be a white country, that people of other races should be restricted or repressed or thrown out altogether. Some of them are Christian nationalists who believe that the United States should no longer be a secular country. It should be a religious country, and Christianity should be put at the heart of American politics. Some of them are, for lack of a better word, predators. The Tate brothers who are, professional pornographers who also attach themselves to Trump and to Barron Trump and to some people, Vance and others around Trump as a way of building protections around themselves in order to prevent themselves from being arrested. They've just been actually finally indicted, but you can see lots of people seeing that there's a break in the system, that rule of law isn't working, and they're all, joining in to try and enact their version of whatever they think the revolution should be. And so that's why sometimes you get these weird conflicting strains. There's sort of different people inside the MAGA movement argue with each other, and some of them are more anti-Semitic and some of them are pro-Israel. But that's because all of them are seeing this huge change in the American political system as an opportunity for them. Who wins at the end and who winds up changing the political system most, we don't really know yet. How permanent these changes will be. It's almost like the floodgates have been open and lots of people are trying to take advantage of it. I mean, if there's one thing that binds everyone together, I think it's an idea about power, that what really matters is having as much power as possible. And that old ideas about power sharing or about creating a world of mutual advantage where the United States was the center of a big network of like-minded countries, and we created a free trade zone or free-ish trade zone with Europe and with Latin America and with others, with Asia and with others. This is gone. And instead what we need is, an idea that we dominate, we control, we get to decide, we impose our views on everybody else. And that might work for some period of time while everybody else gets used to that and catches up. But I'm afraid that the backlash against this kind of United States is going to be pretty profound.
Yeah, well, I think we'll deserve it. I mean, I think if you are in it for yourself only and you're surrounded by barnacle fish who hang on to you because you seem to have the most power right now, and they'll go along for the ride. It doesn't matter if you're aligned in morality. Donald Trump's certainly not a Christian period. The Christian nationalists are riding that train all the way to the bank. But you said earlier that Donald Trump likes to break the law and then see if the courts can catch up to him. So what are your thoughts on our justice system right now? I mean, now that Todd Blanche has been confirmed as Attorney General, the law seems to be only what Donald Trump says it is. But I think we also have a Supreme Court that's on board with that plan. So if you're an American right now, what do you do if you feel like, well, we don't even really have a system of justice right now? What happens if the Democrats win the midterms with Todd Blanche in charge of the Justice Department? Do you see him allowing the election results that might challenge Trump's power to go through? Or is he going to challenge the results the way his boss wanted the Attorney General to do back in 2020, but they didn't do it because it would have been illegal?
So I'm not as negative about the courts as you are. I mean, I'm watching some lower courts make decisions that are in line with the rule of law. I won't go into all the details, but I mean, there are various institutions that the Trump team tried to eliminate. And then they would point to decisions of Congress and they'd say, it's illegal to cut our budgets. And some courts have gone along with that. And the Supreme Court's not going to take all those cases. There are signs of, the federal courts, on one level below the Supreme Court are not all captured. And even the Supreme Court, I mean, we'll see. I mean, if they get an election stealing case, what they would do. But I'm not 100% certain they would be, every single one of them would be all on board with ending democracy. So, it's more complicated than that. But your larger point, which is to do with elections, is very serious, because you are right that the Trump team tried to steal the election in 2020. And I'm sure they were prepared to try again in 2024 had they lost. And they will try. I mean, they're already trying to shape the ground for the midterms in order to make them, as favorable to the Republicans as possible. And I can imagine a scenario in which, if elections are close in some purple states, I can imagine them being challenged by the Department of Justice and by others. I can imagine arguments over voting machines, that may spin out and, may last for some weeks or months. And so we could be in for, both in the immediate run up to the midterms and afterwards, we could be in for a lot of political turmoil. I mean, my impression is that the Democratic Party is prepared for this. I mean, I'm aware of a lot of attorneys and different kinds of legal groups who are preparing for exactly these kinds of lawsuits and situations. And as I said, I have some faith in lower courts being on the right side. But I think Americans should also be aware that this might happen, both to be mentally prepared, but also because the best way to ensure that elections are not challenged is for the results to be beyond any doubt. And that means
Correct.
A large turnout and a large victory. In normal times, I would like to say this in a bipartisan way, but I think right now you would have to have a Democratic victory in order to make sure that the rule of law is maintained. If there is a Democratic Congress, then that gives us a better chance of having a fair election in 2028. If there isn't, then we could have another 2020 scenario. And so
Right.
it's another incentive to have a Democratic Congress and or Senate is just remember what happened what was January the 6th. It was an attempt to block Congress's assertion of the election, confirmation of the election results. And if we had a different kind of Congress, maybe that would have succeeded. So it is really important who is in the next Congress and who controls it, and that is not controlled by election deniers or by people who could be manipulated by the current administration.
Yeah, I think that's essential. And I agree with you. I do have a lot of faith in the lower courts. I have very less faith in the Supreme Court. But I think the problem is, as you're sort of pointing out here, is that once an autocratic elite is in power, it is almost impossible to remove them because they'll do whatever it takes to stay there, even if whatever it takes is destroying their own country. I feel like we're watching that in America right now with the destruction of our power around the world, the dismantling of our education system, our healthcare, our economy, this outbreak of measles, explosive diarrhea. We might have a resurgence of polio. And this is all while people are struggling to find enough food, be able to afford food, be able to afford places to live. And then you look on the flip side with Trump and his family making so much money and his personal lawyer in charge of the Justice Department. And now he's exempt from everything from crimes that might happen while he's in office to tax evasion. He's allowed to do that right now. So I think that it's not, as you said, you would love to be nonpartisan, but right now it really is a partisan thing. If anyone is going to hold this particular leader accountable, it certainly isn't being shown to be the Republican Party. They have shown themselves to be a rubber stamp for him all the way along. And if we want to see any sort of checks and balances or any sort of free and fair election in 28, it really does come down to turnout in numbers that are too big to debate when the results come in.
And we've seen that in other places as well. So one interesting story for those who don't know it is the story of the recent Hungarian election. Hungary is a strange country. It's a little tiny Central European country. You would think not very significant to the United States. But actually the leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, is somebody who made himself into a kind of international advocate of so-called illiberal democracy. In other words,
yes,
he won fairly a democratic election, completely legally elected. He was the prime minister of Hungary. But upon becoming leader, actually for the second time, he decided to dismantle the state institutions. And so he slowly used his political power to take over the media, to take over regulatory institutions, the judicial system. He enriched a group of companies one was run by his son-in-law, but there were others who were friends of his through state procurement, through giving contracts to this particular group of companies, making them very wealthy. They then did favors for him. They bought up newspapers, for example. And in doing so, he made his country, which had been sort of traditionally the leader in Central Europe. I'm actually speaking to you from Poland right now, and Hungary was always the kind of slightly richer than everybody else and a little bit better organized. And he actually made Hungary into, depending on how you count, the poorest or the second poorest country in the European Union through this process of impoverishing the system, persuading people to leave, taking money away from education and healthcare. He also captured the universities, but he was also someone who sold his ideas abroad. He had great influence in the United States, particularly at the Heritage Foundation. Project 2025 was in some ways very much inspired by what he'd done in Hungary. And he became a kind of model, so much so that when he had an election a few months ago, J.D. Vance went to Budapest and made a big speech at a big public event on his behalf, demonstrating that the United States supported him.
Tucker Carlson's dad is a huge lobbyist for Hungary in the United States. Like, they're all so connected with the super right wing and Hungary. But as you're saying, he lost, and he lost because of turnout. This episode of the PoliticsGirl podcast is brought to you by Alloy Health. There's something I've just discovered. The skin changes that start in your early 40s aren't just aging. They're hormonal, specifically estrogen loss. Estrogen naturally helps maintain collagen. It supports elasticity. It keeps your skin hydrated. As your estrogen declines, your skin gets thinner and drier and more crepey, which means that our expensive cleansers and retinol and moisturizers aren't completely up to the job because none of them were designed to solve a hormonal problem. It is very weird getting old. It is weird being in perimenopause. No one warned us about this. No one warned us that we would look in the mirror and not recognize ourselves. And nobody told us that our routines would need to change when we got to this point. which is why I'm happy to talk about M4 Skin from Alloy. This is the first head-to-toe line of estrol-powered skincare. Estrol is a safe, gentle, and bioidentical form of estrogen, clinically proven to rebuild collagen, restore elasticity, and visibly reduce wrinkles. Their full line targets the face, the eyes, the body. 88% of users saw improved skin elasticity using the M4 face cream, while 95% felt smoother skin with the M4 body treatment. This is prescription strength, but without going to your doctor or pharmacy or dealing with insurance. It's HSA and FSA eligible, and it's delivered straight to your door. To get your prescription, you start with an online form. Then you're matched with a menopause specialized physician who reviews your intake and prescribes what's right for your skin. Once you're approved, your prescription ships straight to you. No pharmacy, no hassle. Plus, you get unlimited messaging with your doctor. So why not try M4 Skincare from Alloy and see the results in as little as 8 weeks? Head to myalloy.com and use the code PoliticsGirl to get $20 off your first order. Your menopause specialized doctor will tailor your skincare to your needs. Plus, you get $0 unlimited messaging with your doctor. Head to myalloy.com and use the code PoliticsGirl to get $20 off your first order. Look, I'm one of those people that gets home and takes their bra off immediately. I don't even really need a bra if I'm being honest, but I don't think anyone needs the 70s version of me out on these streets, which is why I love Honeylove. Honeylove has a cloud embrace bra that is a modern wireless t-shirt bra with lightly padded foam cups that feel soft against your skin. It's supportive and wire-free thanks to the bonding technology that allows it to lift without underwire. And in the summer, having a bra that's lightweight and comfortable that doesn't sacrifice support is the way to go. I've been talking about Honeylove for a long time because their shapewear is so good. They use targeted compression rather than total compression to enhance your curves instead of squeezing them. Honeylove is an independent, female-founded brand, so all Honeylove products are intelligently designed by women who actually wear them, including their founder, Betsy, who is highly involved in the development of each product. So their products are designed to work with your body, not against it. Plus, Honeylove products feature lingerie-inspired design details that don't make you want to tell people to look away when you have them on. So treat yourself to one of the most advanced bras and shapewear on the market. Use our exclusive link to save 20% off Honeylove at honeylove.com/politicsgirl. That's honeylove.com/politicsgirl. And after you check out, they're going to ask where you heard about them. As always, please support the show and tell them we sent you. Experience a new standard of comfort and support with Honeylove. He lost because of turnout.
He lost because of huge turnout and because there was finally a leader of the opposition who was able to make this connection between the corruption of the system and the poverty of ordinary Hungarians. So the argument was not just they're corrupt and that's immoral, but they're corrupt, they're taking money from the state, and that's why your schools are so bad. And they're taking money from the state, and that's why you don't have health care. And they're enriching this one group of companies, and that's why, your own small company doesn't prosper. And the argument was successful because it was true and because people could finally see it and feel it. And there was a particularly charismatic opposition leader who was able to articulate that and sell it to people. But also he successfully created a grassroots movement that was able to come out, bring people to vote in large numbers. And I should say, I was in Hungary just about 3 weeks before that election. And even 2 weeks, days before it was about to happen, people could see that the opposition leader, Peter Magyar, was ahead in the polls. But they were still I met lots of people who still didn't believe Orban would just let the election happen, that he would somehow stop it or block it. When they won, there was a kind of overwhelming all-night street party, and people couldn't believe that they'd succeeded in doing it. But it was finally this connecting of the dots. It's not just that, again, that Orban is corrupt and that's bad, but Orban is corrupt and it's hurting you. And that was really the important message that won.
Yeah. And I think Orban, and we should remind people, I believe Orban was in power in Hungary for about 16 years.
16 years.
And he did that over a period of time where he changed the country through the courts, through the media, through the constitution itself. Donald Trump has tried to bang this through in about a year and a half. And people are already feeling the pain that he is causing them through healthcare, to the economy, to inflation, to everything. So it is possible that the speed in which the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, and Donald Trump org itself has moved might actually help us here, that we are already feeling the pain that the Hungarians are feeling. And we can tie the two things together if we do a proper job of messaging and we don't get lost in communism, socialism, boogeyman behavior that they like to push on their opposition.
This is what made Orban successful for so long. So he created an entirely fictitious narrative about immigrants who were coming to invade Hungary and take away Hungarian culture. And just to be clear, there are almost no immigrants in Hungary. It was a kind of mystic campaign, about Hungarian ethnic identity, and we need to rescue it from terrible migration policies. And it really took a long time for people to finally be able to see through it. Maybe, as you say, the fact that they've tried to do this at such warp speed, much faster than anything Orban ever did, will create a backlash. But people can be mystified by these fairy tales. And Orban was very good at telling them, and some of the people around Trump are good at them too.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very good at them. Carolyn Levitt is a genius at doing it. She's angry all the time. I think Stephen Miller has a real vision. I hate the vision, but I think he's got one. I think J.D. Vance is a terrible communicator, so that's not really an issue for me. But Donald Trump himself is an absolute genius when it comes to hitting the zeitgeist, being able to understand people. He seems to be untouchable. It doesn't matter what people try and throw at him. He doesn't seem to be affected by it. And he recently did that interview with Punchbowl News where he said, people aren't mad at me. They're mad at the Republicans. Like he can even disassociate himself from his own party right now. Now, listen, before you go, I'd love to know what your take is on Iran, because I think this is something else that the people of America are clearly upset about. We're clearly losing this war despite what we're being told by right-wing media. We're definitely worse off than when we started. I think that the fear of the U.S. military around the world has actually abated a bit because we're not looking like the winners that we've told everyone we are. And it seems to me that our leader, our president, doesn't understand really what's going on, or his advisors are too afraid to give him the facts because anything other than winning is unacceptable to him. And I was watching an interview with Hillary Clinton recently where she questioned if this depleted weapons problem that they're talking about the U.S. having might actually be the goal of Iran and Russia. She said, is it possible that those two countries have been playing 3D chess, drag America into a war, leave them without the firepower they need, and then potentially attack them at home, which no one has ever had the instinct to do before? Knowing Russia the way you do, what are your thoughts on the potential of something like that?
So I am certain that the Russians have been working with the Iranians. I am certain that they've been giving the Iranians weapons and advice and helping them with PR, because these are countries that have been allies for a long time. And remember that at the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Iranians sent drones to Russia as well. So there's a tight relationship between them. They have sort of similar technology. The Iranians are learning how to use drones from the way the Russian-Ukrainian war has transformed them and so on. And so I think it's very, very likely that wearing down the United States or depriving the United States of its firepower was part of the game. I'm sure the Chinese are also delighted by this prospect. And that could also explain China's support for Iran. The way these states work, I don't know that there's a grand conspiracy and therefore they're planning to attack the United States, but it is possible that they're planning to wear down the firepower and the talent of the United States in order to, achieve things that they want, whether it's China's control of Taiwan or whether it's Russia's control of Ukraine or its influence in other parts of Europe. I don't know. But they're certainly trying to eliminate the United States as a power. I mean, I would say two other things about the war in Iran. One is, it looks to me right now like we're at the point where the future of the Strait of Hormuz is being negotiated without the United States. I mean, it's kind of Iran and its neighbors are now talking about how to make it work. And it also looks to me like the neighbors are beginning to concede that Iran is going to have some control over it, which, if that were the upshot of this war, would be transformational and it would be a disaster. I mean, because they didn't have control over it before and now they would. I mean, that would be a big achievement. The second thing I would say is that I have a lot of difficulty judging what is the real American position in Iran because I don't believe what the administration says. Trump says one thing one day, he's going to unleash hell one day, and then actually the Iranians are pretty nice guys the next day. And He offers these conflicting messages, and I understand that that's part of the game. He wants to confuse people and so on. But the upshot of it is that I just didn't believe them. And that means that I don't know what is our real position there. And I don't know what is the real state of our weaponry. And the Pentagon has eliminated the Pentagon press corps. And there aren't journalists embedded with the US military like there have been in recent wars. And so I feel this constraint doing analysis by the fact that I don't trust them. I don't believe them. I think the rest of the world feels that way as well. And so anybody who negotiates right now with the United States is in a strange position. You're negotiating with somebody who has no credibility, whether you're Iranian or whether you're a European country or whether you're Russia. Why should you negotiate with somebody who's going to say one thing one day and another thing the next, and you have no way of knowing whether their word holds 6 months from now? It's one of the reasons why the war in Iran has taken such a strange turn, but it's also why you're going to see the U.S. role elsewhere in the world also diminished.
Yeah. 100%, because we've changed what people think of us. I mean, this particular president can change his whims from day to day, but it's still America can change its policy every 4 years, depending on who's in office. And I think that there's a lot of countries right now that are like, we can't take this risk. We can't make deals with America because who knows what they're going to be doing. I heard somebody say once, like, we can't make our foreign policy based on what Wisconsin voters choose every 4 years.
The French president said that.
Yeah. I think Macron did say that. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And please tell people how they can follow you and your incredible work moving forward.
Thanks. Well, you can read me in The Atlantic. You can follow me on basically all forms of social media. You can read my books. One of them is called Autocracy, Inc. It was very directly related to what we were talking about. I talk a lot. You can listen to me talking on various people's podcasts, including, I hope, yours again in the future.
Yeah, I hope so too. That would be really great. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
So that was Anne Applebaum reminding us that we need an overwhelming Democratic victory in November if we are going to hold this growing authoritarian movement in America at the gates. There are plenty of groups that see this change in the American political system as something they can work with. If the goal is power or retained power, everyone from the white and Christian nationalists to the billionaire class to the patriarchy and the predators have found their champion in Donald Trump. Everything is for sale. No institution is sacred. And if the Republican Congress members are simply going to abdicate their responsibility to hold this power-hungry group in check, then it's going to be up to us, as it was up to the Hungarians, to come out in numbers too big to challenge. I want to thank Anne for joining us today and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Now go get someone registered to vote and fired up to make a difference. As Anne said in her book, The Twilight of Democracy, there is a seductive nature to authoritarianism. We just have to make the other side more appealing. And we start that today. Until next week. PG out. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.